and glad you're watching KTN's Africa Speaks. My name is Joy Doreen Bira, and of course this year we intend to explore the African continent across all the 54 African nations, bringing you discussions from across these nations. Let's see what online subscribers think of the South Sudan crisis. What will it take to end the conflict in South Sudan is a question we asked on social media. At George Kisundi says a step towards cessation of hostilities is unconditional and release of the 11 detainees. At Kiki Josh says implementation of cessation of hostilities by both parties and easing of some of the demands by both parties. At Ashikoye O says people of South Sudan should realize that God did not make man to live with a sword on each other's neck. And on Facebook, Julius Mbaluto says, I covered South Sudan voting on referendum in London as it was conducted inside a church next to Houses of Parliament. In the UK, it was an emotional moment as all who came to vote expressed their hopes and dreams for a better, peaceful and progressive South Sudan. In the minds of many, it was a new dawn and they voted overwhelmingly for independence to see an end to war. If politicians could only think the suffering they cause to common people as they pursue power in such a ruthless manner, if they can have a proper understanding the loss they cause, perhaps then and only then can they control their desire for power. Now, today on Click, we look at pictures from the world's newest nation, the first being of a picture of a little boy who couldn't find his parents. Now, he actually rests on a truck tire at a refugee camp. Let's take a look at some of the pictures on Click today. Right there, you'll actually notice a picture of a little boy who couldn't find his parents, and he rests on a truck tire at a refugee camp, putting in context the humanitarian situation in South Sudan. And that actually does send quite a big message when you look at the situation in South Sudan, with thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people who have been displaced and are in different refugee camps. Now, the next picture right there is quite a surprising one, where you look at two arrows in a refugee camp directing the fleeing refugees where they should be going. And this is actually a picture that raises so many questions. Is there need to separate the Nuer tribe and the Dinka tribe in refugee camps? And that actually forms part of the discussion that we're going to be having today on the South Sudan conflict. South Sudan, like we mentioned earlier, is the world's newest country, created in 2011 after it gained independence from Sudan. On the evening of 14th December 2013, a faction of the Sudan People's Liberation Army caused a political crisis beginning as mutiny in South Sudan. President Salva Kiir called it a coup attempt and announced that it had been put down the next day, but fighting again erupted on 16th of December and spread beyond the capital Juba to the region around Jonglei, which is prone to ethnic instability, again largely along the ethnic lines. At least 1,000 people were reported to have been killed and 800 other people were injured. Kiir blamed Machar for instigating the coup, but Machar denied any knowledge of it and instead blamed Kiir for playing power politics. Let's take a look at this story.
Ukabila ni adui ya maendeleo. Angalieni yale yanayofanyika katika Southern Sudan. Nilijaribu kuwasaidia, lakini kitu wanataka ni mimi. Nataka kiti changu, nataka kuwa rais, nataka kuwa nini. Mpaka watu wanauawa, sasa 1,000 wamekufa.
Until an agenda is drafted and agreed upon by negotiators from both sides, peace talks between warring parties in South Sudan remain in limbo. Negotiating sides meeting in Ethiopia's capital Addis Ababa have further strained hopes of a ceasefire, citing the absence of reason that will precede face-to-face talks between Salva Kiir and Riek Machar. Yet while IGAD's efforts to commence talks are delayed, clashes between government forces and armed rebel groups are turning into an escalated ethnic war. South Sudan's military chief says as long as there is no ceasefire, killings are set to continue.
We don't have yet a ceasefire. And we don't want them to come and get us somewhere here. So we have to go to them.
The rebel leader had shown the people the tribal way. He went away and mobilized one tribe against the nation. So if the other tribe mobilize in the tribal way, then this country is going to break apart.
United Nations reports of mass grave discoveries in the town of Bentiu Unity State in the north of South Sudan say ethnic killings are rising in what could turn out to be the biggest humanitarian crisis for the world's newest and youngest nation.
You can understand the difficulty of thousands of people coming into a facility which has not been set up for that.
From the South Sudan government side, negotiators say President Salva Kiir has ruled out any power-sharing agreement, while Mashar's negotiators maintain that if Salva Kiir maintains a no-conditions approach, the talks are likely not to begin, not tomorrow or the day after. Joy Doreen Bira, KTN. And now joining me in studio are Magnon Mach Deng, who is a student leader at St. Paul's University. And we also have Amer Manyok, who is the chair lady for the South Sudan Coalition. And also in studio, we have Dr. Shem Ochwotho, who is a convener at the Kenya Diaspora Alliance. And at the I&M News Center, we'll be speaking to Zahra Said, who is an activist from South Sudan. Well, welcome all and thank you for joining me on Africa Speaks. Now, of course, we've seen what has been happening since the 14th, literally the 14th of December, the night of the 14th of December 2013. It's been gunshots, it's been humanitarian crisis, and it's been ethnicity. I will start with Eunice. Eunice, when did you move to Kenya? Because we're looking at South Sudan or the entire Sudan having to go through wars for the last 55 years. Did you come to Kenya partly because of that?
I came to Kenya in 1992 to the refugee camp Kakuma, and I registered as a refugee up to 2005 when the CPA was signed in Kenya, Nairobi at Nyayo Stadium. And then we went back home.
And then you went back home. And then when did you finally, or why did you finally decide to come and settle in Kenya?
The reason why we settled in Kenya, because Kenya is a stable country. Kenya has established the system of the education for our children. Most of the South Sudanese who were in diaspora during the war, majority settled in Kenya and in Uganda due to the schools. And we have been working in South Sudan. Myself, a chairperson for Tourism and Hospitality Chamber for South Sudan, Juba, and I own Hotel Kush Resort. Today, when we came out from Juba recently, is because the fight just erupted without anybody knew that there is a crisis that is coming to our country like that. And then we had to be forced to move out.
Right. And let me now hear from Deng. Deng, from your own view, what exactly do you think is the problem in South Sudan? Because if we're seeing reignited fighting, yet South Sudan has gone through 55 years of war, where exactly do you think the problem is?
Well, actually, I was not in South Sudan when the fight erupted. I was in Kenya. And when we heard from the media and from the relative on the ground, messages are different. But according to what people said, is that the fight was not, actually was not issue of Nuer and Dinka. It was a tiger. A tiger is a government, is a president guide. They fight themselves. And then that fight now went out of Japan. And that's where we are hurting the president announcing. I was watching the TV. Also, we heard from the media that it was A, it was B. So we don't have the right information
on who exactly is behind
exactly
the conflict.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess that is where I bring in Dr. Shem. Dr. Shem, What do you make out of the conflict in South Sudan?
Allow me, Joy, to compliment the Standard Group, KT in particular, for making this happen, because I see an opportunity here to recognize that we are all interdependent. Kenya needs South Sudan a lot, and South Sudan needs Kenya and its other neighbors, and the other neighbors also need the world's youngest nation. So I'm very delighted with the efforts that are already being taken by government, but perhaps much more needs to be done. Of utmost priority is how do the guns go silent. It's very unfortunate to continue to spill blood, any blood, whether it's South Sudanese blood or a foreigner's blood. It's very unfortunate for that to happen. So as a priority, it's important that a way is found to bring that to an end, preferably peacefully.
Right. And I'll go back to Eunice now. When you look at the humanitarian crisis in South Sudan at the moment, we're seeing thousands of people who are being displaced. Now, if you looked at the pictures that we did show a few minutes ago, there was a situation where we are seeing refugees of different tribes being separated. We're seeing the Nueras being asked to take a different direction in the refugee camp, and the Dinkas as well asked to take a different direction there. Does this mean that if these two tribes are put together, they cannot be peace?
At the moment, you cannot maybe blame the UN, but later on in the future, we should not encourage that. That one in the future will still preach the separation among ourselves. You cannot separate the Dinka from Nuer and Nuer from Dinka. We are one. Our blood is one. Our physical appearance is one. We behave like the same. So when we were in refugee camp in Kakuma, UN also exercised that, to put different tribes in different groups. That one really incite the conflict among the people. And even when we went back to Juba, land was difficult for the people to be issued the land. Some people who find themselves that are strong enough from particular group, they group themselves and they went and grabbed a certain area. And this is what actually inside the conflict in Juba right now. Because you could see the Dinkas went and grabbed themselves the area around Jebel. It's called Jebel Dinka. And then the Nuer also grabbed themselves the land on the other side in a place called Mio Saba.
Right.
That one is the one that caused this conflict now. Because if people were really scattered, for example, right now, I'm along the Gong Road with my neighbors from Nuer. They're from Bentiu. I have almost 3 or 4 neighbors. They play with my children. They share the birthday parties. They share everything. The Nuer from Bentiu is a best friend to my daughter. She's from Bor Dinka. And I doubt whether we can fight. Even the husband and my husband can never fight. I and that lady who would have come even together here, we can never fight because we become relatives, we become friends and all this. We should not encourage UN to do that.
Right.
Maybe in a few days to come.
Great. Now let's connect to Zahra Said, who is at the Town Center studio. Zahra, if you can hear me, what role do you think the media can play in trying to prompt the end of this conflict?
Yeah, thank you. Media can play a vital role. Number one, media acts as a neutral body which doesn't side. It gives information. It gives information, and the information should be based on accuracy, not hearsay, not propaganda. Once media goes off point, then the violence escalates. Media should not side with either the conflicting parties. As a media, there are things we need to watch while reporting based on evidence. What is the actual cause of this conflict? What triggered the conflict, and how best can we do it? Media also can act as a peace builder in between, can go in between the two ethnic communities that are fighting. The problem that came was not actually based on ethnicity, but it turned out to be ethnicity. The role of media is to come in and mediate both sides and play a neutral role so that this community and the other community does not see themselves as enemies. They should see themselves as South Sudanese. They should remember that on 9th January 2011, everybody went out as one South Sudan, as one nation, they went out for referendum. Why did they go out for referendum? Because they wanted to have their own country. After having their own country, 2.5 years down the line, what has happened? A brother turned against a brother, a sister turned against a sister, a neighbor turned against a neighbor. Is that what we went for in January 11, 2011? No. So in this case, media has a role to play. And all the media houses, be it a national media, local media, or international media, should come in and do more research and see what is the real cause, the root cause of the conflict, and let the public and the world knows, so that the two communities, we cannot live without one community. And South Sudan is for all. We have over 64 tribes in South Sudan. And the 64 tribes, each tribe will have its own chance. Let us forget about the ethnicity. Let us forget about the tribalism. Let us look ourselves as South Sudanese and forge a best way forward. And this can be done best by the media. Everybody has a small radio. People read in the newspapers and they hear. Don't listen to what I say.
Zara,
like
if you can hear me, just tell me something. Have you noticed that some media houses are not well balanced in when it comes to the reporting that they're doing and the factual information that is being given?
Yeah, some of the media houses are not balanced. You know, you dance according to the tune. You fear sometimes for your safety. Some of the media houses are being threatened by our government because they give out the truth. Like media people work under pressure.
Well, thank you so much, Zahra. That is an activist from South Sudan, giving her point right there, especially when it comes to media's role in this entire conflict. Now, I'll come to you, Doctor. Doctor, from your perspective, and as a Kenyan who is working in South Sudan.
Correct.
How do you think the East African region can contribute to having peace in South Sudan, as well as the international community?
Maybe, Joy, allow me to just complement what Zara said about media. I think I would encourage more media to be present in South Sudan, including Standard KTN. I think it should be explored.
Right.
I should also add that in the past, we know that we're currently going through a very difficult time in South Sudan. But this has not always been the case for the past 2 years that the young nation has been independent. But most of the media has given just the negative side, which I would say is probably 1 out of 1%. The 90%, there is about maybe 20-30% that's very good that the media ordinarily has ignored. I would want to encourage the media and believing that the crisis we have now is going to end one day soon. But as we work together with the people of the new Republic, South Sudan, as the region works together with them to develop, because it needs also to catch up with the rest of the world, just like the region needs to catch up with the rest of the world.
Right.
The figures that we're still talking about of GDP per capita, even for Kenya, is still relatively low. We're talking of about $1,000 per person per annum.
Right,
Yet,
but let's look at the role that the international community can play in seeing an end, knowing that there's so many Western countries that have interests in South Sudan. How exactly can these countries play a role in bringing peace to this country?
I think IGAD in particular, for the region, beginning of the region, has been involved in capacity development, working with the government of the Republic of South Sudan and the people of South Sudan. Maybe much more needs to be done in that regard. I'm often, when a country has been in turmoil for 50 years, we need to understand that there is a bit of trauma. It takes a little time for things to normalize. But maybe we could learn lessons here from Rwanda. Rwanda government has got a mechanism of dealing with ukabila, tribalism. Maybe we could also learn from Tanzania in this regard. So there are lessons that we could borrow, and there would be homegrown solutions to deal with conflict.
Right.
But the international community needs to come on board. Even the corporate world, the private sector, needs to come on board to work with the people and government of South Sudan to make sure that the country picks up for the common good, not just of the country, but also of the region and of the world.
Great. I'll now come to Deng. Deng, I should say you're one of the youthful South Sudanese citizens. And for you, I would say, knowing that you've spent the better part of your life in Kenya, how best do you think, or what would it take for you to return home, settle in South Sudan, and know that you're going to have a peaceful country and that your life is going to be just as peaceful as it has been in Kenya?
Actually, I one of the victims in the war that broke out in 1983. I lost my parents, both of them, in the war. I came to Kakuma as a refugee. I registered myself as a refugee up to date. My cat is still there in the camp. What happened in South Sudan is like a dream to me, because if I'm the South Sudanese now, if all youth are like me, these were ideologies of politicians. They were deeper in ideologies, and they are using us, youth. In a scenario, you can imagine right now, Salva Kiir Mayardit, the son of Salva Kiir, is in the university, is in the hotel, is actually relaxing and enjoying life. Yet the common people like us are suffering on the street. No food, no water, and you are just dying there. Nobody's care. Likewise to former Vice President Nyong'o Machar. I would like to tell you that even if you go to the ground today, people who are fighting on the front line, ask them the objective they are fighting. None of them will give you the reason why they are fighting. They were just being lied to. And this is, I would like to tell my youth, South Sudan needs all of us. It's not either Dinka nor Nuer. We need to unite ourselves, and we need to condemn the situation. Me either supporting Salva Kiir or supporting former Vice President Nyong'o Machar. We are condemning the situation, and we are telling them to go to the table. Stop fighting and negotiate.
Great. Stop fighting and negotiate. That is the message coming in from youthful Deng. And well, he's been here in Kenya, but of course his coming to Kenya was not by his will. It was because of the war that broke out in 1993. Now, on 10th January, South Sudanese troops on Friday recaptured the key northern oil city of Bentiu from the rebel forces, according to officials, following days of fierce fighting that has forced tens of thousands to flee the area. And a spokesman for President Salva Kiir said that the city, one of the two state capitals that were in rebels' hands, was now under our control, that is, under the control of the government. But there are fears that the nation could soon end up in a civil war. That's a war between different groups within the same country. Fighting has broken out after the president accused his deputy of trying to seize power. Now, this divided the army into two sides, but peace talks aimed at trying to find a solution have also begun. And we'll cross over to our town center studio to again reconnect with Zahra. Zahra, do you think that the peace talks are going to yield results?
Optimistic, the peace talks are going to yield results. Number one, we want to end the hostilities by the president releasing the political detainees. If the political detainees are released and they participate in the negotiation, they say their reason why they tried the intended coup, which we have no evidence of, let them bargain. The accuser and the accused to sit down and propose and forge a way forward. All these leaders, both parties come from the same political party, the largest party in South Sudan and the ruling party. What happened in between during the Liberation Council? They should all be convened and they should say what reforms they need. And I will urge also other political parties to intervene so that the loopholes that we have seen in SPLM, other political parties should not repeat it. The other issue is that
if other political parties should not repeat it, I guess that is the point where I'll say thank you so much, Zahra. We're running out of time, and I'll come back to Eunice as well as we wind up. We're going to have just a few seconds as we wind up to give our final remarks. But from you, from your side of the story, and knowing that you play a key role in South Sudan, do you think these talks are going to yield results? And do you think that the conditions that are being put by the two different sides are going to be adhered to by the same? We're looking at Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, but do you think that their conditions are going to be agreed upon?
Yeah, thank you so much, Joy. I know there is a serious pain on both sides. People lost their loved ones. They lost wives, and they lost their children, and they lost their brothers and sisters. There is a pain. But due to the pain that is affecting the whole nation, the South Sudan, the South Sudanese, for due respect, the South Sudanese has been suffering for all this long, more than 55 years. The whole generation have been suffered and suffered and suffered. For that sake, I'm urging His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Sudan, to humble himself and accept the reality of peace because of our reason. We know those people who lost their loved one are feeling a lot of pain. It has erupted when we were not expecting, because we know all of them, they have gone through all this.
Right.
And they were the fighters, by the way. And you know, God gives and God takes. If God decided to take those people who have gone now, for the rest of the people who are still alive, if assume 1 million has gone, we have still 7 million people. Because South Sudan during the last census, it was counted to be 8 to 10 million. If 1 million has gone, still the 9 million people who are still alive. Well, we need to help them.
We need to help them, and that actually brings us to the end of the show this afternoon. I'd like to say thank you all for joining us on the show. Dr. Shema Chwoto, who is a convener for the Kenya Diaspora Alliance. We've had Amer Manyok, who is the chair lady for the South Sudan Coalition, and we've also had Deng, I'm sorry, we've run out of time, and we've also had Zahra Said from our City Center studio. Thank you all for coming on the show. We do appreciate that. And this conversation continues online under the hashtag South Sudan Conflict and Africa Speaks. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. I'll see you again on the next show.
They will